I just think it's so funny that, when we bring magazines in, I brought a 14 Times with a cover story about the Loch Ness Monster, and you have a Radio Times from 1968 with Alf Garnett on the cover, just playing so beautifully to type there. Welcome to Pop Screen, the podcast that is he as you are he and you are me and we are all together. We are that corner of the geek show that likes to look at the good, the bad and the barely comprehensible of movies either starring by or about pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker. I've just completed the film Song of the Suburbs with BFI's Our Screen Heritage programme. Thank you. A little silent applause there from Mark. And I'm also a regular writer for the Geek Show, and I've been joined this week, although I may have given it away, but take it away.
You've been joined by somebody from the Liverpool City region at last to talk about the Beatles.
It has felt a bit like stolen valor, getting people from outside of Merseyside to talk about the Beatles on previous episodes. Yes.
You've been joined by Mark.
Yeah.
I'm also on the Geek Show. You can find me on Letterboxd. You can find me on We Are Cult. What else have I done? Scarred for Life, Volume 2.
Yes. Indie MDB.
Indie MDB is my new one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Find us on YouTube. Like and subscribe, please. And most recently on Points of View, no less.
Yes.
BBC One's own Mark Conliffe.
I feel that for people like us, being on Points of View is just one of those things you can tick off the bucket list, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. It was either that or Crime Watch, wasn't it?
And only one of those shows could survive being hosted by Jeremy Vine.
Yeah, that's true. I thought of that. That's true, actually. Yeah.
Yes, the TV equivalent of that meme of the Grim Reaper knocking on that row of doors.
Should have been fine. Horrible man.
Yes, well, I should. He's very successful. I should borrow some of his broadcasting tips, like stretching out the last words of every sentence to make it sound like you made a point. So, in that spirit, let's do a film by the Beatles.
Good. I like it.
It's good. It's more of a quality show already, isn't it?
I bet Radio 2 wouldn't play I Am the Walrus now, though. They would have done in the 90s.
Because it's got the word knickers in it.
Yeah, they would do that now.
Yeah.
I remember going to work in 2001. I used to listen to Wake Up to Wogan. And we were driving into work. And we had the Doors, Riders on the Storm, playing at like 8:05. It's not going to happen now, is it? It's all like Little Mix and stuff like that now, isn't it?
Well, Radio 2 used to be the station you would go to when you got old, and now it's the station you go to make you feel old, as you sort of turn it on and it's playing like Madonna or something, and you're like, oh, finally, some modern music. Wait a minute, when was this released?
I haven't listened in a long, long time, to be honest. Once all the celebrities came in and the DJs left, I thought, yeah, this is. I think I packed in when Radcliffe and McConey moved to Six Music, I think.
Well, that makes a certain amount of sense. Yeah, yeah. I will say Sarah Cox is very good. I like Sarah Cox in the
Yeah,
show.
she's good. She's good.
Yeah.
We're already moving way away from what we're supposed to be talking about.
We really are, aren't
We're
we?
on a literal magical mystery tour.
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah, they
because
didn't. The BBC didn't call on me for nothing, you know. This guy can do links.
yes, please replace Scott Mills. But yeah, we are for our Christmas episode. We've taken some sideways looks at the concept of Christmas on pop screen over the years. We've done Whitney Houston because she's associated with a pretty indelible Christmas number one. Slade, who were associated with a pretty indelible Christmas song. The Pogues, Mariah Carey, likewise. But we are really here this year to commemorate not Christmas, but the day after. We are here to celebrate that time in Christmas on Boxing Day 1967 when the Beatles ruined a hungover nation's evening viewing.
Do you know I've done research, which is weird for me when I come here because you're the research man. I just come on and just talk politics and swear
It's
a
why
lot.
people love coming on this show because I do all the work.
Yeah, I just turn up and just take the piss. But no, I
Yeah.
did some research. You would think, wouldn't you, that the general sort of popular consensus regarding this film is that it stunk out Boxing Day more than your dad's shite, basically, didn't it? And you know how it was just like a universal flop. But did you know it was repeated?
Yes, it was repeated because John Lennon phoned up the Beeb and said that they'd put a lot of effort into filming this thing in colour,
Yeah,
and you've broadcast it in black and white.
exactly. Yeah, because I have.
Ah,
It's very hard to see, isn't it? But I've got a Radio Times from. I've had this
wow.
for years. I bought it from Earlsdown Market in the 90s, and it is December the 30th to January the 5th, 1968. Well,
Wow.
67 to 68. And if you look at page 63, which is Friday, January the 5th, there is proof that Lennon's complaint came good.
Yes.
It was broadcast again on BBC Two, which was the colour channel, from 9:55 till 10:45 that night. And it says, Beatle Magic. Ringo Starr, George Harrison, John Lennon and Paul McCartney can be seen and heard in the... my eyesight's getting really bad. In the new film Magical Mystery Tour. A feast of musical entertainment at 9:55 tonight.
Did you feel that it lived up to the billing as a feast of musical entertainment?
Feast of music, entertainment. No, I'm a bit of a defender of this film, it has to be said.
Yeah.
It's massively flawed. But then what do you expect from a film that has got like complete novice directors and a really half-baked idea?
Yeah. That idea, we should point out, was this is basically Paul McCartney's brainchild. All of the Beatles are credited as co-directors, along with this other dude who you suspect did a lot of the directing, if we're brutally honest. But Paul McCartney had this idea for a film that could use a loose plot to link together some songs off their new EP. And his reasoning for it was that at this stage the band had abandoned touring. And, you know, the logic of it seems to have been, well, touring, you know, that's a big sort of part of our income, a big part of our appeal we're getting rid of. But fortunately, the British public's appetite for mostly improvised, psychedelic, plotless short films will never wane. So this will be a more than adequate.
Richie Starkey, you've done it again. Yeah, it's certainly that, isn't it? It's certainly that. It's a curious. It's supposed to be their idea of Ken Casey and the Merry Pranksters, but meets the charabangs that they remember going on from Liverpool to Blackpool to see the Illuminations every year. That's a heady mix.
It's a heady mix, and I think this sort of, when McCartney was asked to defend this film, he said many years later, well, it's the only footage of us playing I Am the Walrus, which shows you how important the live music thing was to his conception of it.
And brilliant footage.
Yeah, brilliant footage of that. Now, I very rarely claim to be better than Paul McCartney at anything. But I think over the course of this podcast, we can put together a better defense of Magical Mystery Tour than that. And one of the first lines of defense that I want to open is that it is a very good bottling of one of my favorite things about the Beatles, which is that for all they were forward looking, for all a lot of their music still sounds modern today, they also still have one foot in this very Edwardian kind of Britain of big top circuses and seaside holidays and music hall, things
the Edward Lear-esque type. Yeah.
A version of Britain that simply does not exist anymore, at least in popular culture.
Yeah, and of course was very fashionable in the late 60s anyway, wasn't it? So probably because of them, really, or largely because of them. This is it. It's just four lads from Liverpool shaping an entire culture, really, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Whatever they were looking at, the rest of the world soon followed, which is particularly towards Edwardian England over here, certainly.
Because there's a parallel universe where, like, the rock and roll boom, the Mersey beat boom, the coming of psychedelic music just sweeps all that away. When you actually listen to the British top 40 from the early 60s, it's very funny that, like, you've got this mix of, rock and roll singers and Mersey beat bands and things where you can really hear the future coming. And then the next one, it'll be, someone doing a novelty record about grandma's tights or some shit. And, there's no reason for that to persist. And it persisted largely because it was part of the Beatles and particularly Lennon and McCartney's worldview and upbringing, and something they viewed with fondness.
Yeah, and I think that's the most successful elements of this film are when they focus in on that, on the worldview or the cultural upbringing. Where it loses it is when they do try to be, weirdly, when they do try to be psychedelic. Well, the Nova at that point is the psychedelic era, but they'd lose it then because you can't really mash up sort of West Coast psychedelia with Northwest Coast picture postcard humor, really, can you?
Yeah. And it's like, it's telling that this was regarded as like I would say the only real misstep the Beatles had in their imperial phase. I think everything else, there are things you can point to that are not as good as other things, like Let It Be is obviously a bit of a salvage job, but I don't think they did anything that disappointed fans other than this. But it's like, I think that's a reflection of how universal the Beatles were at this point, because Sgt. Pepper's had come out. They'd got the broadsheet critics going, no, if you listen to this, the music is actually really sophisticated and really intelligent. And then they do something that does require some investment in the psychedelic culture. Had they done this around the time of Rubber Soul, it would have been fine, because Rubber Soul was maybe the last point where only the kids were listening to them. But 67, it's maybe for all they were hitting their psychedelic stride in their music, in terms of their mass appeal, it had maybe got a bit too big for them to do something weird and niche and like teen focused like this.
That's a really interesting point, actually, because you just know. I mean, I haven't got to hand what the viewing figures were, but you just know everybody was going to be sat around. Bear in
Yeah.
mind, it is now just 3 channels. You know,
Yeah.
they've just got the BBC Two, haven't they? So prior to that, it was just BBC One and ITV. So I mean, the viewing figures back then was through the roof, really, weren't they? So such a mass mainstream appeal band at the peak of their powers, they're gonna have a lot of bums on seats that Boxing Day, and they present this.
It's almost admirable in that sense.
It is, isn't it? It is. It really is. I mean, to the credits, they went away and went, well, okay, that didn't work, but variations on a theme will work a bit further at it, and they give us Yellow Submarine, which is, I mean, okay, I can see the sort of playing with it by saying, well, we'll do we'll do animation. People might buy into that more, but also it's primarily for children. You know, so you're already putting it in a box away from that sort of mass market thing. But it follows many similar sort of things that they try here that didn't quite come off here.
Yeah, definitely. And some of those are things that were picked up by other artists. I mean, one of the things that strikes you when you watch it now is that this is basically a precursor to the visual albums trend, that now basically any sufficiently big artist will have at least a go at this. The famous one is Beyonce's Lemonade, where you do what is effectively a music video for every song, but you have a linking theme and you play them back to back. So, yeah, it's always a kind of fish or flesh form for me. I'm never quite sure whether I'm meant to view it as a movie or just a collection of music videos. But Magical Mystery Tour does at least show that, people were having that problem like nigh on 60 years ago. It's not been fixed in the interim. It's not a new issue.
It is, as you say, it's a fish or fowl thing, isn't it? People either go in with it or they don't. But speaking of influencing other bands, I mean, they did it almost immediately, didn't they? And with the Rolling Stones, with the Rock and Roll Circus, and why did they not learn from that? They go, yeah, that was a flop. We'll do something like that. Yeah, they just shut the bed. We'll do that as well.
They are often overlooked as pioneers of music video, though. I mean, there's this sort of legend that Queen invented the music video with Bohemian Rhapsody, but as soon as the Beatles decided that they weren't touring anymore, that's when you got, was it Paperback Writer? That was the first one they did the video for. I remember there's one for Rain, which was the double A side with Paperback Writer, if memory serves.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's quite a big step into the future on its own.
Yeah, and it always amused me when they say, "Oh, well, Queen invented the music video," and it's like, well, really? Because I've been watching VH1, back in the 90s. I'm watching VH1, I'm seeing like videos for See Emily Play by Pink Floyd that are clearly made around the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah, it's very odd. Very odd.
It's like being gaslit by the music industry. No, they didn't exist before then. You sure? Why am I watching this then?
It's funny though, because it's like you can see why the Print the Legend version caught on, because it makes sense that the first music video would be the biggest single by the biggest band of their era. Whereas with the Beatles, inventing the music video and inventing the visual album is just like one of a lot of things that they were just throwing out at the time. If it seems like a lesser achievement, it's probably because, they did Sergeant Pepper's in between these two things, which tends to suck a bit of the air out of the room, really.
I mean, you never really get to say this because it just sounds absurd. But when you think about it, it is correct. they're quite an underrated band. Because, I mean, hugely influential, hugely, spoken about rightly with reverence. But when you look at every single achievement or pioneering, work they did, we don't give them the credit for it in a weird way.
No,
It's
no.
strange. So, yeah, quite underrated in a perverse kind of way.
So yeah, in terms of content, this is like I hadn't really thought about the phrase magical mystery tour, but it is quite anachronistic these days, isn't it? I think that
Yeah.
maybe people younger than us may not know what a mystery tour was.
No. And even our generation, you'd hear like it's a magical mystery tour. Usually, if you're on a charabang and the coach takes the wrong road or a diversion, you'll hear somebody slightly older going, "We're on a magical mystery tour."
Yes,
And
yeah.
as a kid, I'm like, "That's the Beatles," but I didn't get what the illusion was at all.
No, that's 100% true. It was basically a form of cheap holiday, and it was like the equivalent of when HMV bundle up crap that they can't sell as mystery boxes. And, you buy a ticket, you go somewhere that is, generally a sort of holiday camp somewhere in the British Isles, but you don't know where it is when you go. And you can sort of see the appeal of that for an improvised film because it doesn't need a structure. It's just a road trip. And if it turns out to be kind of inconsequential and just a shaggy dog story, well, so were the majority of these holidays. It's within the concept.
And so were the majority of these vehicles for pop groups in the 60s anyway, weren't they? And
Yeah,
we've covered a few of them. They
we
are
have.
sort of inconsequential shaggy dog stories anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
even even the Beatles sort of like highs in cinema, Hard Day's Night Help, are pretty shaggy dog stories, really.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, Hard Day's Night, we covered as the very first episode of Pop Screen. It's just one of those great right place, right time movies. I think had the Beatles not ascended to a point where that film's parody of their celebrity became an actual realistic reflection of it, it may have been forgotten.
Very possibly, yeah.
So they've got this kind of not sturdy structure, but a structure that can absorb some of the things that can go wrong. And they've got quite a nice supporting cast around them as well, haven't they?
Yeah, lovely supporting cast that isn't used well enough, really. I mean,
Mm,
you just mentioned then they've got something to hang this sort of inconsequential
yeah.
structure. The one thing that the Beatles did learn when it came to cinema was you hang your story on Ringo.
Yes.
Every single fictional film they made is it revolves around Ringo, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, and so does this. It's set up with him and his aunt,
Jesse
buying the
Robbins,
tickets. Jesse Robbins, yeah,
brilliant
who's
Jesse Robbins,
very funny in this.
who
Yeah,
disappeared in the 70s. She sort
yeah,
of last role was like 1974 or something like that, and I thought, oh right, so did she die young? But no, she carried on. I think she died at 86, but she must have just thought, well, that's enough, and just
yeah.
retired from performing. But it's strange.
It is very strange. Yeah, yeah, and you know, this is
She came from that sort of. People might know from Ken Loach films at the time, like the Wednesday plays. She's in Up the Junction. I think she's in both Up the Junctions, actually. She's in the Wednesday play by Ken Loach, and then she's in the Peter Collinson
all right.
big screen adaptation, I think. But she came from that sort of almost John Littlewood aesthetic of like, let's get real faces on. She might work with John Littlewood, I'm not sure. Let's get some real faces on screen with real lived experience, And they
Mm,
were invariably Cockney because that's where, John Littlewood, Stratford East was and where a lot of the work was. So you get people like George Tovey, um, Jesse Robbins, what was her name? Rita Webb. Rita Webb was another very popular and prominent figure in those sort of things as well. That really look. So it always goes back to that neo-realist style as well, doesn't it? They're real people and they look like real people. They're not actors who are just like, I've done 20 years in rep, darling, and now they're playing a working class person.
Hey up, Viva! It's time to go down the pit. Yes.
Exactly, though. It's true. I mean, there's that line about the Likely Lads, Clements and Lafrene, and they said that prior to getting the Likely Lads on television, TV sitcom was Kenneth Moore and Donald Sinden in sort of like looking at French window, the tennis type sort of thing. Not French windows. I don't know. You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Sherry and saying, "Oh, good lord, is it time for tennis?"
Yeah, it's quite funny. All of that is largely derivative of Noel Coward, who was, of course, a boy from the suburbs who spent his entire adult life cosplaying an aristocrat. So yeah, it is one of those sort of mother nice, be careful what you pretend to be situations, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah. But it's a great structure to hang on because you've instantly got the most lovable Beatle, who everybody identifies with, from like children up to your gran, would be like, "Oh, that's Ringo,"
Yeah.
So that's a shrewd move, and he's sort of battle axe anti, going on a coach trip, going on a magical mystery tour. And why did they then get rid of that within about 5 minutes?
They do, yeah, it's so true.
None of these comedic threads or narrative threads that they painstakingly put together at the start are ever fulfilled. They don't go anywhere.
And part of it is like, well, fair enough, it's meant to be a big sort of freak out, a big sort of improvised road movie kind of rambling thing. But yeah, it's part of the issue, I guess, is that while Ringo was probably the best actor of the Beatles, and certainly, as you say, the most relatable Beatle to hang a story off, he was also like by no means the group's best or most prolific songwriter. So as soon as this has to actually get into the musical part of the film, which, gratifyingly, it does pretty much straight away. Fair enough, that's what the people want. But it means it goes from this Ringo-centric setup to The Fool on the Hill, which is basically a Paul McCartney solo song. And that connection is just immediately cut.
Yeah, that's true. And this is where you get the sense that this is McCartney's brainchild. I mean, I find it really telling that you watch this film and Lennon and Harrison are very invisible.
Yes, Harrison.
They're like the kids on the school trip. They're sat on the back seat of the bus, just quietly dicking about, or just sleeping or whatever. There's no interest here from either of them to be involved in this. I think it is like, this is something Paul wants to do.
Well,
I'll go along with anything, lads,
Yeah. When you get to the obligatory George song on it, which is Blue Jay Way, it's a great song. I'm very fond of that song. I love George Harrison in general, but it is a song about being really fucking bored.
Yeah.
And there's the problem, really.
It's really testing the audience's attention span.
Yeah.
It's a bold move.
Let's see if it pays off. Okay, so let's should we see if we can sort of work out which musical number here works best? Because we've mentioned The Fool on the Hill, and that's not just a McCartney-led song. He basically just went off to France to film that himself. Didn't get any permits, didn't tell customs what he was doing. It's all massively illegal. But well, he's not all smiles and thumbs up. He's a hardened criminal.
We planted these seeds, and some of them came up illegal. Yeah,
So
hard
yeah,
criminal role, going out there without any permits, filming.
yeah,
It is his brainchild, really, isn't it? This is his
totally.
project. This is
Yeah.
him. Eppie's dead. I've got to carry the weight, and this is one of the first things.
Yeah, we should focus on that bit because yes, this is the first project of any kind that they put out after the tragically young death of Brian Epstein, their manager. And you do think that that is quite extraordinary that the person who had shepherded you to be the biggest band that had ever existed in musical history at that point is dead.
Yeah.
And the show has to go on. You just have to go in the studio and go, roll up for the mystery tour. It does put the project in a very different and much less sort of inconsequential light when you think of it as it's not exactly a grief project, but it's a project by a band who were suddenly uncertain of their direction for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the fact that this was a flop, but
Mm.
I don't think the knives were out in the way it would be now.
No, no.
And I think that speaks of a kinder generation, or certainly a kinder press at the time, in the sense that they sort of went, well, they have just had this terrible bereavement, and they're allowed an error.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also probably helps that by the time this was repeated, they were also already working on the White Album.
Yeah,
And when you can follow it up with the White Album, it does kind of shut up any criticism
it
you might
does. That is
get.
true. That is true. That is true. Yeah. But I mean, even as you say, though, I mean, like grandparents would be watching this. Grandparents
Yeah.
might be buying the White Album. But yeah, it is an interesting one, and I'm really intrigued by. I wanted to get I know I do have it somewhere. I wanted, again, for research. I wanted to get the Arena documentary out, and I've got it somewhere, but I physically could not find it. I know I've got it on a DVD somewhere, DVD or off the telly, but I physically could not find it, which was really pissing annoying. But
Yeah.
from what I remember, there was this, and I may have got this wrong, but a lot of stuff is sort of mentioned about the whole Ken Casey influence, and whether is it Casey or Kesey?
I don't know, actually. When you started pronouncing it Casey, I thought, right, better fall in line. I've always thought it was Casey.
Could be Kesey, couldn't it? Yeah, yeah. The one flew over the cuckoo's nest guy.
Yeah.
When that sort of influence reared its head, was the talk that McCartney literally wanted to just do this? Well, we'll just drive somewhere and see what happens. That it wasn't going to be like anything scripted anyway. It was just, which speaks of a remarkable naivety, because it's like, you're the most famous band in the world. You can't really just drive somewhere and see what happens. You are what happens.
That's very true. Yeah.
Nobody's gonna act accordingly or
Yeah.
as normal when you rock up in a bus.
And in a lot of ways, that did happen, and that they did face that problem because the
Yeah.
film wasn't scripted. McCartney basically had a sheet of A4 that he'd written some ideas on, and the
Yeah.
rest was just like drive around and see what we can do. And as it turned out, they had to take the signs off the bus because they couldn't drive anywhere without loads of kids slapping on the side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's down in the West Country, wasn't it? I think.
They went through Devon and Cornwall, and they ended up at RAF West Malling, which was used in the Dam Busters raids, but had been decommissioned by then.
But it's a weird sort of. I'm going to say this a lot, really, in this. It's weird. It's supposed to be. I know, but it's weird. It's a weird kind of thing, because it's like, it's the most vaguest of ideas. It's almost like, when they did the Young Ones, and Alexi Sale famously said there was just like a hole in the script, and they went, and Alexi now does his bit.
Yes.
You feel like a lot of this is that. So you've got like, well, Vic Spinetti's free, and he does that funny Sergeant Major thing that makes us all laugh. So we'll do that. You know, it's like,
there's a lot of that
in
in
context.
Yeah.
It doesn't need context. It makes us laugh.
And I think, to be fair, some of that kind of variety show aspect is the most fun you're going to have with this. I think it falters when it rests too heavily on the Beatles comic chemistry, because this is the point where, the White Album is basically a series of solo albums that's been smashed to bits and reassembled. It's great, but it's obviously not something that can hold together as much as it can. So you can't really do that kind of Hard Day's Night, We're the Last Gang in Town sort of thing very effectively. And I think the bits where they try don't work.
It's just not really there anyway, is it? I mean, there are no, apart from the wizard scenes, which make no fucking sense.
And are quite bad. They were exactly what I was thinking of when I thought.
Cringe-makingly awful. Let's put on silly costumes and do silly voices.
Yeah.
It forgets that, see, crucially, I mean, this is not only is it the first project without Epstein, it's also the first film project without Richard Lester.
Yes, that's a good point.
It crucially forgets that Hard Day's Night and Help got by on the comic chemistry of the band because they were playing versions of themselves. Weirdly, they're asking themselves to play characters at one point in this, and these weird wizards that has no payoff. There's no real payoff to their inclusion or understanding of what their inclusion is. But they're not very good at playing those characters. So you lose that wonderful sort of chemistry that they had in like Help, Window Rattler song. All that is gone because they're adopting these comic personas that they've not got the chops to do. What I'd like to have seen more in this was like the earlier films. Get them mixed up on the bus, but they don't. Ringo never shares a scene with Paul, John, or George. John or George are together. Paul's on his own as well. So you've got Ringo on his own, Paul on his own, and John and George sat at the back, giggling away to themselves. Giggling away to themselves, yeah. There's no interaction, and that's a fatal flaw. That's a really fatal flaw. But it also possibly speaks of, as you say, a band moving in different directions already. And that sense of this is Paul's idea, we'll just go along with it.
Yeah, to a great extent, I think it helps that you have Richard Lester, who's a great director, as the sort of ringleader of the chaos. I mean, the fact that they are credited as joint director for this is already, I think, a severe overstretching of resources, that maybe the performances would be better if they'd had a director who could actually capture the improv and shape it into some cohesive story. Unfortunately, Robert Altman hadn't yet broke through, so
no, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've said but I get the sense that the direction is mainly, like you say, it's the other guy and Paul. I think. Yeah. I can't imagine George doing anything on this. Can't even imagine John doing much on this.
No.
Really.
There's a couple of individual credits that I think are kind of interesting. George Harrison is credited as composer, so I assume some of the instrumental passages, as well as Flying, which is a proper, for Beatles song, but some of the sort of noodlier soundscape things in it may be his.
It's probably George.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was a genuinely creditable achievement, if true, is that Ringo Starr is credited as the film's cinematographer.
With his MBE.
He's bloody good, isn't he? Yeah.
Richard Starkey, MBE. Other than those, I think this is predominantly Paul. In fact, there's one person I do want to talk about, but I'll sort of hint at it first, because I used to have a blog years ago. It's a very embarrassing blog, but I did do posts about this. Yeah, this is a review. This is a quote I found, I should say, from Paul. Then there was the pretty stewardess, Mandy Wheat, who was a bit busty. I must admit, in casting those busty girls, there was always a little bit of ulterior motive. It's just a thrill of being able to say, oh, could you just stand up, please? Could you turn round? It was just pure libertine casting there. Now, quite apart from Paul being a randy get,
hardened criminal Paul McCartney, as we have established, is adding to his rap sheet.
Being a lech. But also, that to me speaks of he was casting.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes.
I mean, fair play to Paul, because I mean, I had a crush on Mandy Wheat because of this film.
Yes.
And my blog at the time was basically trying to find out about it, because this was like 20, only not my whole blog was involved in that. Just these. Hey, in this day and age, who knows? You know, it could be an entire podcast on it now.
Yeah.
But a few posts I did were from 2012, were trying to find out about it. And the great thing back then was people would just suddenly be in touch and say, I found this, I found that. And I got something from Stephen Wheat, who was, I think, a second cousin.
Oh.
Yeah. And he told me that she changed her name, basically. Yeah. She died in 2001. She's only 54 or 55.
Gosh.
She changed her name to Miranda Forbes and had a long career afterwards, which she did. As soon as I said that, I managed to think Miranda Forbes, and I looked and found her, and thought, oh, I've seen her in that. Different looking person by that point. We all age, in fact, another bit of research. Ta-da. Now I got that from eBay for about $1.99 or something like that. It's a signed photo, and it just said signed photo of Miranda Forbes. I don't think they had any idea who Miranda Forbes was or what the Beatles link was, because if they did, I imagine that would be a lot more expensive than $1.99.
Yes.
So that was.
You never know, because Hard Days and Magical Mystery Tour stuff seems to be like generally an exception to the rule that everything connected to the Beatles will just be merchandise to death. I mean, the music for the dream sequence in the restaurant, which is just called Jesse's Dream, has never received an official release. And it's mind-blowing to me that after 3 anthology releases, after that whole one project, after Peter Jackson's million-hour documentary on Disney Plus, it is just astonishing to me that there is still an unreleased bit of Beatles music.
Yeah.
But there it is.
I didn't think of that. No, that is very strange, isn't it? Yeah. Wow. I do love that scene because it's pure Dali, isn't it? It's pure off the wall surrealism. And you've got Lennon, Italian or Spanish waiter, I'm not sure. Brilliantine hair, stuck on moustache, shoveling what looks like vomit onto a table, but it's apparently spaghetti.
Yes.
Spaghetti.
Do you know how that scene came about?
Go on.
John Lennon just dreamed it, like he had a dream while they were filming, and Paul went, "Yeah, we'll put that in the movie."
Why does that surprise me? If Ringo just said, like in Peter Jackson's thing, if Ringo said, "I've just farted," brilliant, we'll put that in the movie. Because they literally stumped out this. We'll throw that in. But yeah, that is pure Lennon. That scene is pure Lennon. Absolutely.
100%. He's actually quite hard to recognise in it, which I think is like less to do with any sort of subtle character work and more to do with it. John Lennon's image is so cemented in by this point that he just has to slick his hair back, take his glasses off, and grow a little moustache. and he might be a completely different person. You just cannot work out who that guy is until halfway through the scene.
And that weird sort of it's that weird that fine line between being hilarious and really eerily terrifying.
Yes.
There's one bit where he just smiles and I crack up, but in a different light or a different angle, that smile could look, oh,
it really could.
Yeah, it's. But that is the thing of dreams, isn't it? It is that kind of like, it's that innocuous and peculiar, strange, unnerving thing at the same time.
And it's where two of the big sort of names in this, other than the Beatles, do their best work, because we've got two notable other recording artists in this film. You've got Ivor Cutler, who plays the bus conductor, Buster Bloodvessel, a very influential pun, that.
Yes.
And then the whole thing ends with Viv Stanshall and the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band.
Yeah, which is a bold move because, as I mentioned earlier, Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. It's admirable that people invite other bands onto their project.
Yeah.
But you could run the risk of that band literally just stealing your thunder. And, The Who did that on the Rock and Roll Circus with the Stones.
Yeah.
And you could argue that there's a bit of that going on with the Bonzos turning up. If it wasn't for
fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. It is a moment. If it wasn't for I'm the Walrus being so good, or Your Mother Should Know being so good and so silly, in the same breath, then you wouldn't possibly just be thinking about the Bonzos and Death Cab for Cutie.
Yeah, and I think, because they exist so perfectly in that kind of spot that you mentioned between something being really daft and really creepy. Death Cab for Cutie, to our younger listeners, is not just the name of a band. It's a parody of the 50s and 60s fashion for what we call death discs. These things like Leader of the Pack, which are stories of teenage romance that end in violent tragedy or a horrific accident.
Well, it just sounds like a Mickey Spillane novel, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It sounds like a brief aside in a James Ellroy book.
Yeah.
The Death Cab took Cutie to the fuck pad. Yeah. There are always fuck pads in James Ellroy's novels.
I've never read any. You're on your own at this point, Graham. What you do in your foot pad is entirely.
Well, it's quite apt because a friend of mine watched this when he was quite young and has this sort of almost traumatic core memory that, at the end of all of this, the cumulative point is that the final location of the magical mystery tour is basically the Raymond Review bar.
Yeah. Later to give us the comic strip, but at the moment, he's given us this moment in the Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah, was it Paul Raymond who ran that? Was that where the name comes from? And it was sort of briefly infamous as the only strip club in the country that showed anything. Well, it showed mobile nudity, isn't it? There's a sort of windmill theatre thing where you can have fully nude women on stage so long as they don't move, and then
they have to stay perfectly still.
Yeah.
It's the great catchphrase from the Adam Faith show, Budgie, where he was the Soho chancer, and his job was to stand outside the strip club door and just repeat, "They're naked and they move. They're naked and they move."
I didn't know that bit. The bit of trivia I always know about the windmill is that Agnes Burnell nearly brought the whole thing down when she got an itch one night.
But I mean, there is nudity in this. It's just or semi-nudity, because that scene ends with one of Paul Raymond's strippers censored with a giant censor glass, which must have ruffled a few feathers on Boxing Day evening, certainly among your mums and dads and your grands and granddads.
Quite weird, yeah. It's I was reading a book recently because I've just done an Outside the Blue Box article on the Geek Show site. This absolutely will be out by the time we release this, but I don't think it is yet. But about late night horror, which was the BBC sort of big experiment. Their first. What am I getting?
Plug. I've just wrote an article for
I thought you'd unplugged your microphone or something in pro. It's like, Jesus, if he's going to go on about his own articles, I'm just going to take it out the wall.
I almost went the full Peter Cook on you when you were, I've just read a book recently. Oh yeah, I read a book, have you?
Any happier? Yeah.
Sorry, I digress. You carry on.
But I'd just done a piece about late night horror, which was the BBC's first colour horror series. And like the colour version of Magical Mystery Tour, it was broadcast on BBC Two, which at the time was the colour channel because the BBC had no idea if this shit was going to work. So they just stuck it all on the minority interest channel. And I was going through a lot of books like Ben Thompson's Ban This Filth, Letters from the Mary Whitehouse Archive, or Colin Schindler's I'm Sure I Speak for Many Others, which is a book of letters to the BBC that are mostly from the 60s. And the priority of the busybodies of that era was a bit different to what it became in subsequent decades. They were really agitated about social realism. The attitude behind most of the letters is, of course there are homeless people, of course there are unmarried women, of course there are homosexuals. I don't want to see it. So maybe, stuff like even some of that late night horror, which is still pretty graphic today, or, a gag about a stripper's tits being covered up by a big black censored bar is a bit down the list in a strange way. In a weird way that they're good at grasping the attitude that these things are done with, because the nudity in Magical Mystery Tour is just a gag. But someone like Ken Loach or Dennis Potter is an actual social critic. And it's almost kind of flattering to them that the complainants recognised them as such. They were angry about things that were supposed to make you angry, which isn't always the case in the history of British censorship.
That's an interesting point, which I hadn't thought of. Like you say, you could probably, because of course you've got to remember in the context of the time, television on high days and holidays, mainstream, primetime television schedules would have things like Miss World on, wouldn't it? So
yeah.
You used to seeing tits and ass, for want of a better analogy there, better word in there. But if you saw, let's say, in a Dennis Potter play, an unmarried mother getting out of bed without a bra on, they probably would be more up in arms because it's grounded in a certain realism that they're objecting to.
Yeah.
Whereas a bit of glamour, even if it's what we now know as really sordid glamour, is, or if it's done in a tongue-in-cheek way, like Benny Hill was extremely popular.
Yeah.
The Carry On films were extremely popular. I mean, Mandy Wheat, Miranda Forbes, Miss Winters gets to sit in the spaghetti scene with a bra on, but as Paul has said, she's a busty woman. But then you sort of cut under that by having a napkin in the bra itself, don't you? So there's the comedy element to that. It's like we're not just showing. Yeah, I imagine that's how they sort of get around it in a way, isn't it? It's like we're not just gratuitously showing nudity or semi-nudity. there's a joke here.
It's a bit of seaside postcard fun,
It
George
is, yeah.
Orwell wrote about this stuff. It's maybe that is the attitude that underpins it, but
And it is,
yeah,
like I say, it goes back to that. It is this strange marriage of sort of 60s psychedelic counterculture and seaside postcard. I mean, you've got Nat Jackley in this as well. He was a huge figure in sort of like panto and music hall.
yeah,
Again, just taps into where the cultural education stemmed from. It's the things that they probably watch with the mums and dads.
yeah. It seems almost impossible to imagine that scenes were cut from this, but Nat Jackley's big sort of silly walks showcase was cut from it. There was an Ivor Cutler piece that was cut for it, which I always thought was a shame. I think it
He's
really
not very well served in this, is he, Ivor
no,
Cutler? Not at
no,
all. I mean, despite, again, I don't know whether it's because they just got bored or they never really bothered to have time to consider the Ringo and Aunt Jessie storyline. But I mean, Ivor Cutler's Buster Blood Vessel falls for Aunt Jessie. There's some very tender scenes on the beach, isn't there?
yeah.
It's really sweet. But but then you get the spaghetti scene, and it's just sort of forgotten about again at that point, isn't it?
It's weird because it underpins the spaghetti scene. It's like that is framed as Aunt Jessie's dream, and she's in this restaurant with Buster Blood Vessel, and so that's the kind of foundation for it. But then the scene, as it turns out, just has nothing to do with that, and that's just set dressing for it. But I would love to have had an Ivor Cutler scene in it.
Yeah, definitely, because he's ill served. He's such a unique talent, and you don't really get a sense of that unique talent at all here.
He's one of those people, isn't he, like Stanley Unwin, who maybe if he arrived a decade or two later would have been part of this psychedelic scene, and people would have been saying, these spoken word pieces and poems are so strange because they're tuning into the head market. But he emerged during a time where it's just entertainment, isn't it? It's weird entertainment.
Yeah, it's just it's almost music hall in a weird way. It's like when people say about Kelly's Heroes, Donald Sutherland's hippie is clearly a out of time sort of person, and he is, because his whole thing is that is a hippie from Vietnam. It's suddenly in a World War II movie, but I also think it disregards the fact that there were weird people.
Yeah.
We had the surrealist movement. We had the beatniks. The World War II gave us Spike Milligan. So I mean, there were weird people knocking about. There always will be. There always was.
No, that's very true, and that also sort of leads you to consider that just before this, the last Beatles film project as a band was Help, but the last Beatles-related film that came out just earlier in 1967 was Richard Lester's How I Won the War with John Lennon in the cast. And that's very much sort of that's a very focused examination of the same thing, isn't it? That, a lot of the kind of absurdity of the 60s generation and a lot of the anger of it is really passed down from those people who were prescient enough to look at World War II and just say, well, this is fucking ridiculous. We already we had a world war and now we're doing another one, and it's still so class stratified. The only difference is that the upper class twits running it managed to actually win a war without, losing unbelievable amounts of troops, unlike World War One. But the absurdity of it is a massive driver of the Goon Show of Spike Milligan and all those other humorists that you've just mentioned who were paving the way for this.
And it's why, when they've got a gap in the script, they say, well, Victor Spinetti can come along and do his Sergeant Major, because that's what that generation finds amusing. And you've got to remember as well, they were a hair's breadth away from being called up, weren't they, the Beatles? They were the first sort of like group
macro generation
ended, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Lennon was all for running away to Ireland if it happened, wasn't he? He didn't want to serve at all. So yeah, that whole shadow of like your dad's experience or your older brother's experience even looms large over the sort of cultural psyche, really. And it's weird because Spice World, I know you covered Spice World on Pop Stream before.
Absolutely.
They then tried to do the same gag with Michael Barrymore. But it has no relevance because it's Michael Barrymore. He's shit. You know, he's only ever copied other people's material, chiefly John Cleese or, as we've seen here, Victor Spinetti. Two, that humor doesn't mean anything to the 90s generation. You're asking them to invest in the granddad's sort of experience, and that's not relevant.
But that is a huge part of the Cool Britannia project, that Spice World is really the sort of both the zenith and the nadir of, is that we just pretend it's the 60s again.
Exactly. I was just going to say, it's calling back to the 60s. It's not calling back to the 40s, which is what the Beatles were doing in the 60s, or even the 50s. You know, it's just calling to a specific moment in time, which is the 60s, and how that was funny in the 60s without understanding why it was funny.
Yeah, no, 100%.
I find that really interesting. It's like not getting the joke. It's basically just understanding that something is funny, but not understanding the punchline.
Yeah, it's like the sort of the kid in school who copies the funny class clown's jokes and doesn't get the same laugh. You know, it's like Piers Morgan on Have I Got News for You saying jam because Eddie Izzard got a laugh last week by saying jam.
Yeah.
You know, it's
that's a much more kinder one that I was going to say, which was it's Peter Cook, David Frost, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how kind it is to compare someone to Piers Morgan, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's true, yeah.
But that kind of anti-establishment anger that kind of it equips a lot of the nonsense with teeth, I think, is also a huge factor in why I Am the Walrus is so great. A lot of people approach that song as being basically the Beatles being silly, the Beatles saying nonsense. But when you actually sort of look at the lyrics of it, it is absurd and it is nonsensical, but it keeps going back to these images of authority, of policemen, of school teachers, and linking it to both violence and nonsense. I think it's a much more significant and menacing piece than its cultural caricature suggests.
Yeah, and they do. You know, people say, "Oh, it's almost like what was the technique that Bowie used to do where he cut the
cut-up technique, the Burroughs.
What was that technique that Bowie did where he cut up? Yes, the cut-up technique.
Yeah, it's funny, that, isn't it? William S. Burroughs was a linguistic genius, but not all of his ideas were that sophisticated.
No. Well, people think it's just a stream of conscious nonsense that is really, it's like, oh, you're really doing the psychedelic bit. But I mean, lines like Yellow Matter Custard dripping from a dead dog's eye was like school playground stuff in Liverpool in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And again, but people don't realise that, and I find that really interesting. It's just, it's there's always been that weirdness, and I think that's what the Beatles understood at that point particularly well, is that there's always the weirdness. You know, things can look bright and breezy. I hadn't put this in words, and I hadn't really thought of this till I put it in words as we've discussed it over and over. But things can look bright and breezy and silly and funny, but there's this underlying current of like strange or odd, or, you know, from the spaghetti scene, you know, which can be funny, amusing, and unnerving in equal measure. And maybe that's what they're doing here, is they're asking us to sort of say, isn't our formative experiences in culture and our idea of leisure and entertainment really quite weird?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. I certainly think that one of the things with magical mystery tour is that you have to sort of recontextualize it. And in some ways, Time's done that. Like I say, in an era when, Janelle Monáe can make a whole visual album around Dirty Computer, the idea of doing a road trip movie around magical mystery tour is not as weird as it once was. But I think
Yeah.
you lose the other thing, which is that the 60s is this time of questioning, and it is this time of looking back and sort of wondering about the values you grew up with, and saying to some extent that the way we can battle this is with nonsense, and it's with introversion, and it's with sort of personal expression. And a lot of these things are very naive in hindsight. It turns out that Western capitalism could not actually be overthrown by beat performance poetry. Um, Unfortunately, yeah, we missed our shot with that one. But I do think you have to see it in this time. Like, one of the things I wondered when I watched this is, like, while this is obviously the strangest thing ever broadcast on the BBC on Boxing Day, how weird is it by the standards of contemporary quote unquote head films? And I looked up, what are the films from 1967 that I've seen and logged on Letterboxd? And some of them are very normal. But, there's also The Miraculous Virgin by Stefan Ewer. There's Spider Baby. There's Walerian Borachik's Theatre of Mr. and Mrs. Cabal. I would go so far as to say that Theatre of Mr. and Mrs. Cabal is a stranger film than Magical Mystery Tour. It's a genuinely baffling experience. Yeah. And I do think maybe, as we said, this is one of those instances where the Beatles were slightly too hip for the room. It's like, all right, the audience who are watching, the experimental Polish animation can get with this, but this is going out on the BBC on Boxing Day. But, I think it does show them as being just as tuned in with their time and with the undercurrents of what's going on in the underground as something like the White Album would more successfully achieve.
I think you're right. And I think what I love about doing these podcasts is that, and I hope it reflects with the audience as well, is that you sometimes you can sit down, like I say, I very rarely do research on this. I've done a little bit today, Usually I sit down and just waffle.
Yeah.
But you can come away with a different appreciation of something and just through talking it over. And I think I've done that here by thinking, well, yeah, they are questioning what our values are, what our cultural experiences are all about. It's very easy to, and it has happened. It's very easy for people to knock this off as like, oh, it's just them being a bit weird. It's them trying to be Dali. It's them trying to be, anything from like Dadaism and surrealism. They'll just throw all that at it and say, oh, it's just that, it's just them trying to be a bit hip. But no, it is them being uniquely hip because they're approaching it from a personal standpoint, and they're doing it in primetime BBC on Boxing Day, which you can kind of understand the BBC. They've gone, well, we want another help,
we've got the biggest band in the world, and
we've
they're
got
offering us exclusive content. Yeah,
we've got them for an hour on Boxing Day. This could be the new help, the new Hard Day's Night, and they gave them this.
But in another way, you could kind of understand the BBC sort of going with it, because you imagine there's a lot of people at the corporation watching us and thinking, well, I don't see anything in this, but then I didn't see anything in all of the other things they've done, and they were successes. So
they took chances back then. The BBC took chances back then because people just trusted the creatives and trusted the audience. Whereas now it just seems to be all they trust is, themselves
and overseas
formats. Yeah. If something has done well, let's replicate that to the nth degree. It doesn't matter if the other side has done it; we'll just replicate it in our own way, and just keep churning the same thing out because hey, that's what you want. There's no inform, educate, entertain left, really, because they don't value the creative anymore. They certainly don't value the intelligence of the audience.
And it's
Point of view, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
I'll
absolutely.
Never be invited back.
This is the kind of cultural criticism that led to Mark being invited on Point of View to say that Mr. Burton was quite good.
Talk for 3 minutes, they told me, and I got 20 seconds. But then only everybody gets 20 seconds. Fair enough.
Was all the rest of it just you slagging off the BBC for being creatively timid? Is that why it wasn't broadcast?
That's why they only used 20 seconds to answer. I think they lied to me. I think they just saw the 3 minutes, but we can only use 20 seconds of this.
Well, I think
but I mean, even if they were timid about it, even back in '67, at least they had Strictly Come Dancing. Well, not Strictly, it was just called Come Dancing then. At least they ended with some Come Dancing dancers at Dancing on the Ballroom in Blackpool, didn't it? Which still happens now.
Yeah.
We still put up with that on a Saturday night now. So, I mean, just don't have 4 Liverpool loons in white suits.
Yeah, the quality of the musical guests on Strictly's results show has nosedived a bit since the Beatles, hasn't it? Bless him, Ollie Murs just isn't hitting him the same way.
Don't even start me, Ollie Murs. There's a Pontins going somewhere without a blue coat. Blue coats escape from Pontins. I hate that man.
But yes, I think where is a suitable place to end with a Hard Day's Night? I think that's as good as we're going to get. Mark, would you just like to... Magical Mystery Tour, sorry, yes. Mark, would you just like to remind people where they can find you?
You can find me at The Geek Show. You can find me at We Are Cult. You can find me at In Scarred for Life, Volume 2. You can find me in lots of places. You can also find me on Letterboxd.
Yes. You can find me on Letterboxd as well.
IndieMDB. Sorry, I've got to say IndieMDB. I keep forgetting because it's very new for me. I just keep forgetting.
It's very good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you should go and watch Mark's IndieMDB reviews. He gets a lot into a little YouTube reel. And it's a good selection of movies as well, I thought. But yes, you should look for me on Letterboxd. I'm just under Graham Williamson. I'm on Instagram at Graham W Film. I'm slowly assembling a website over on Fabric at grahamwfilm.fabric with a K info, I think it is. Let me just check. It's so new that on fabric.com. grahamwfilm.onfabric with a K.com. And you should donate to our Patreon because this is probably going to be the last pop screen of the year, and we've got some interesting new things coming up on Patreon interesting new things coming up on Patreon next year. We are hoping that we will have a podcast together. Just a regular podcast, which we're still kind of working out the format of. But if you enjoyed this show, it's basically going to be like that. I think it's going to be.
This is the kind of shit you like, then.
Yeah, we're going to shovel it on your plate like we're a Spanish John Lennon with some spaghetti.
Or Italian, we're not sure which one it's supposed to be. It's something mildly xenophobic and offensive.
Yes. And that's at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show. We'll be back in the new year on this feed with half of our 2025 review show. But until then, I've been Graham.
And I've been the Walrus. Yes, wanted to say that.
And we'll see you in a fortnight's time.
See ya.